To anyone else, the sight was one of utter desolation. A broken man and his dog facing a ruin. Elias Vance, hollowed out by a grief so profound it had become the architecture of his bones, stood before the skeletal remains of a collapsed cabin, the land around it choked with weeds and forgotten ambitions. His German shepherd, Commander, ignored the decay. The dog was fixated on a sheer rock face behind the property. His powerful body tensed, whining low in his throat as he pawed obsessively at the unyielding stone. For months, this had been their purgatory, a self-imposed exile where the silence was broken only by the ghosts of Elias's past and the scraping of his dog's claws on granite. To any observer, it was just a worthless patch of forgotten land. But Commander, with an intuition that defied logic, knew it held a $200 million secret. A secret buried with a forgotten history. A secret that would unearth the truth about the day Elias's world ended. And a secret that could get them both killed. If you believe in the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog, and the idea that some wounds can only be healed by loyalty that asks for nothing in return, please support us by subscribing. We'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? The days had bled together into a gray, featureless smear since Elias had inherited the remote parcel of land from a distant relative he'd never met. He came here to disappear, to let the forest and the quiet consume what was left of him. The memories were relentless, a constant, looping film reel of dust, chaos, and the face of his best friend, Leo, in the final moment. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making each breath a conscious effort. He was failing, and he knew it. Some nights, the bottle of whiskey was his only companion. A cruel friend that promised oblivion but only delivered a sharper, more agonizing morning. It was on one of those nights, as he sat on the rotted porch steps with the cold glass in his hand, that Commander's strange ritual began to truly penetrate his fog. The dog, usually an inseparable shadow, was at the rock face, digging with a frantic energy that was entirely out of character. He whimpered, a sound of desperate urgency that cut through Elias's stupor. Elias ignored it at first, but the next morning Commander's food was untouched. He refused water. He stood guard at the rock, his amber eyes fixed on Elias, a silent, unyielding demand. He would not eat, he would not rest until Elias came. It was an ultimatum. For the first time in a year something needed him. That simple, profound fact was an anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. The dog was giving him a mission. He set the bottle down, picked up a shovel, and walked towards the granite wall, the first stirrings of purpose faintly warming his frozen soul. The work was brutal, punishing, and exactly what he needed. His body, softened by inactivity and neglect, screamed in protest as he cleared brush, hauled away loose rock, and leveled the ground at the base of the cliff. Each swing of the pickaxe, each shovelful of dirt, was a blow against the inertia that had held him captive. He sweated out the poison of regret and self-pity, his muscles burning with a clean, honest pain that overshadowed the dull ache in his heart. Commander worked alongside him, not digging anymore, but watching, a focused supervisor whose approval was Elias's only goal. The dog would occasionally nudge a specific area with his nose, a subtle redirection, and Elias learned to trust it implicitly. His special forces training, long dormant and associated only with trauma, began to reemerge in useful ways. He assessed the stability of the rock face, using principles of engineering to clear debris without causing a landslide. He worked with a disciplined rhythm, a methodical patience that had once kept him alive in the most hostile places on Earth. Days turned into a week. He was eating again, sleeping through the night, exhausted by physical labor instead of haunted by spectral nightmares. Then, Commander became agitated, focusing his entire being on one section of the wall that looked no different from the rest. He whined and pawed at a cluster of boulders. Elias spent an entire afternoon carefully leveraging them out of the way. Behind them was not a cave, as he'd started to suspect, but a perfectly square, man-made cavity. Tucked inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had mostly disintegrated, was a heavy, rust-pitted metal box. He carried it back to the shell of the cabin, his heart thumping with a strange mix of trepidation and excitement. It felt ancient, a time capsule from a forgotten world. The lock was a complex, old-world mechanism, a series of tumblers that would be destroyed by force. Elias laid out a small toolkit on the dusty floor. The skills came back to him as if he'd used them only yesterday. The delicate touch, the intense focus, the ability to feel the faint clicks and shifts of metal deep within the lock's housing. His hands, which had trembled for a year, were now steady. The lock clicked open with a satisfying finality. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and leather. There was a journal, its cover brittle with age, and a set of heavy, intricately designed silver keys, tarnished nearly black. He opened the journal. The elegant, looping script belonged to a man named Silas Blackwood, dated 1888. Silas was a prospector, a man who had fled a world he no longer understood to find solace and fortune in the wilderness. His words painted a vivid picture of a man who had discovered an impossibly rich vein of silver within the cave system. But his discovery was tainted by paranoia. He wrote of claim jumpers, of ruthless men who would kill for a fraction of what he had found. The journal was not a diary of riches, but a manual of secrets. It contained cryptic maps, riddles, and warnings, detailing a series of hidden passages and false trails designed to protect the mine's true heart. The final entry spoke of sealing the entrance and hiding the key, trusting that only someone with patience and a quiet heart could follow his path. He called the final chamber the Guardian's Heart, and wrote that the silver keys would open the locks along the way, but the final door required a different kind of key. Elias felt a sudden, fierce connection to this man from the past. He would see this through. He would protect Silas's legacy. Armed with the journal, Elias now saw the landscape with new eyes. A gnarled oak tree, one he'd passed 100 times, matched a sketch on a brittle page. According to Silas's notes, the true entrance to the cave lay concealed beneath its sprawling roots. It took him 2 days of careful digging to find it. A narrow opening, completely collapsed with earth and rock. This was no simple excavation. It was a rescue operation. He spent the next several weeks undertaking the dangerous work of shoring up the entrance. He felled trees, stripped them into timbers, and constructed supports, meticulously reinforcing the tunnel foot by foot. The work was slow, deliberate, and deeply absorbing. For the first time since the ambush, his mind was fully occupied by the present moment. The heft of a log, the angle of a cut, the tension of a rope. The restoration of the cave entrance became a mirror for his own. With each timber he set in place, he felt a part of himself being rebuilt. He was sleeping better, the nightmares receding into faint echoes. Commander seemed to sense the change, the oppressive cloud of sorrow lifting from their small world. His tail, once perpetually low, began to wag again. The project demanded supplies he didn't have, forcing him out of his isolation and into the small, nearby town. At the local hardware store, the owner, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, started to greet him with a warm smile. She'd seen him when he first arrived, a ghost of a man buying nothing but whiskey and essentials. Now she saw a man with sawdust in his hair and purpose in his eyes. "Building something?" she asked one afternoon. "Restoring something?" Elias corrected, the words feeling truer than he knew. His newfound peace was shattered by the sound of an engine. A low, expensive purr that didn't belong in his world. A polished black SUV, starkly out of place against the wild landscape, rolled to a stop. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his shoes immaculate despite the dusty ground. He was handsome, charismatic, his smile radiating a practiced sincerity. "Elias Vance?" he asked, extending a hand. "Marcus Thorne." Thorne Development. Elias didn't take the offered hand. Commander, standing beside him, let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the ground. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flickered toward the dog. "I'm buying up land in this area," Thorne said, his tone smooth as silk. "I want to build a series of high-end, eco-friendly retreats. Your parcel is the last piece of the puzzle. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. Enough to start over. Anywhere you want." The offer was staggering. an amount of money that could solve every practical problem in Elias's life. But it wasn't a practical problem he had. He looked from Thorn's polished smile to the timbered entrance of the cave, the monument to his own fragile resurrection. He thought of Silas Blackwood's trust. "It's not for sale," Elias said, his voice flat. Thorn's charm evaporated, replaced by a flicker of something cold and hard. His gaze lingered on the cave entrance for a fraction too long. "Everything is for sale, Mr. Vance," he said, the words no longer an offer, but a statement of fact. "You should reconsider." As the SUV drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake, Elias knew this was far from over. Commander's growl didn't subside until the vehicle was completely out of sight. The intimidation started subtly. A few nights later, the generator that powered his small cabin sputtered and died. The fuel line expertly crimped in a way that looked like accidental damage. A week after that, a crate of supplies he'd ordered was delivered, but the food inside was inexplicably spoiled. These were classic psychological tactics, designed to create friction, to make his life difficult, to wear down his resolve until Thorn's offer seemed like an easy escape. Elias recognized the playbook. It was meant to make him feel isolated and vulnerable. But he wasn't the same man he was a few months ago. The restoration had forged a new resilience in him. Then came the official letter from a high-powered law firm. It was filled with legal jargon, citing obscure environmental regulations and historical land use bylaws. It threatened injunctions, lawsuits, and even eminent domain, claiming his unstable excavations posed a risk to the surrounding ecosystem. It was a declaration of war. Thorn wasn't a developer who had been rebuffed. He was a predator who had been denied his prey. He didn't just want the land. He wanted what was inside it, and he was willing to burn down Elias's world to get it. The threat solidified Elias's resolve into something unbreakable. He wasn't just protecting a dead prospector's legacy anymore. He was defending his own sanctuary, the one place on Earth where he had started to heal. With a renewed sense of urgency, Elias pushed deeper into the cave system. He followed the cryptic clues in Silas's journal, using the silver keys to unlock a series of cleverly hidden gates disguised as rockfalls. The path twisted and turned, a labyrinth designed to confound and discourage. Finally, he reached a dead end, a solid wall of calcite. The journal's final riddle spoke of this place. Where the guardian weeps, its heart is revealed. Elias studied the wall. A thin trickle of water seeped from a fissure, running down the rock face like a tear. He pressed a specific pattern of stones near the fissure, as described in the journal. With a low groan of grinding rock, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a large, dry chamber. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a breathtaking sight. Stacks of silver ingots, stamped with Silas Blackwood's mark, lined one wall. On shelves carved from the rock were historical artifacts, pottery, tools, and ornaments from indigenous tribes that had long since vanished. But in the center of the room, what drew his eye was something that didn't belong. A modern, hardened pelican case. His blood ran cold. He approached it slowly. It was sealed with a simple combination lock. On a hunch, he entered Leo's birthday. The latches sprang open. Inside lay a military-grade satellite phone and a small, encrypted data drive. He recognized the hardware instantly. It was from his world. He took it back to the cabin, his hands shaking as he powered up an old laptop and plugged in the drive. The encryption was military-grade, the same protocol his unit had used. It took him 6 hours, but his training had included cryptology. When the files finally decrypted, the first name he saw made the air leave his lungs. Marcus Thorn. The files laid it all out in cold, irrefutable detail. Thorn, a private military contractor hired as a logistics consultant, was a double agent. He had been selling intelligence on corporate resource interests in a conflict zone. The final file was a mission brief, Operation Desert Serpent. The mission where Leo died. Thorn was their high-value asset, the man they were sent to protect. But he had sold them out, feeding their command bad intel, deliberately leading Leo's fire team into a perfectly staged ambush. It was a cleanup operation. Thorne silenced the team that knew too much about his activities and cashed in with a rival corporation. The cave, the silver, it was all part of his escape plan, his retirement fund, stashed here long ago. The grief that had crushed Elias for a year transformed in an instant into a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. This wasn't about money or land. This was about Leo. This was about justice. Elias knew going to the authorities was a fool's errand. Thorne was a ghost, a man with powerful connections who knew how to bury evidence and discredit witnesses. The data drive was a smoking gun, but in the wrong hands it would disappear. Justice wouldn't be found in a courtroom. It would be delivered here in this valley on his terms. The choice was clear. He wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. The skills that had been a source of his trauma now became the instruments of his vengeance. The property was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield he was preparing. He spent the next 48 hours in a blur of focused activity. He used his knowledge of demolitions to rig non-lethal traps, pitfalls and snares designed to disorient and disable. He used the cave's unique acoustics to create listening posts, allowing him to hear movement from hundreds of yards away. He set up a perimeter, using the terrain to funnel any intruders down a single, predictable path. The restoration work he had done, the timber supports and cleared pathways, now served a tactical purpose. He was no longer Elias Vance, the broken recluse. He was Sergeant Vance, the operator. Commander seemed to understand the shift. The dog was quiet, alert, a silent partner in the preparations. He was the ultimate early warning system, his senses 1,000 times sharper than any electronic device. Elias was laying a trap, and he knew Thorne was too arrogant not to walk right into it. Thorne arrived just after dusk, as Elias knew he would. But he wasn't alone. 2 other men, dressed in black and moving with the fluid, disciplined economy of trained mercenaries, flanked him. They were coming for the drive. Elias watched from a concealed position, his heart a steady, cold drum. He let them pass the first perimeter line. Then he initiated the first trap. A tripwire, almost invisible in the twilight, sent a deadfall of logs crashing down, separating the 2 mercenaries from Thorne. They were disoriented, confused. From the shadows, Elias used a high-powered slingshot and ball bearings, silent and untraceable, to shatter the lights they carried, plunging them into darkness. They were professionals, but they were in his environment now. He led them on a chase through the woods, using sound and misdirection, picking them off one by one with snares that left them tangled and incapacitated. He saved the final act for Thorne. He allowed him to get to the cave to believe he had the upper hand. He let him walk the winding path to the Guardian's heart, the chamber where the silver and the evidence was stored. Thorne entered the chamber, his pistol drawn, a smug look of victory on his face. "I knew you were resourceful, Vance," he said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "But you're just a soldier. You follow orders. I give them." Elias stepped out from behind a stack of silver ingots. "You gave the order that killed my friend." Recognition, and then amusement, dawned on Thorne's face. Leo? He was a good soldier, loyal to a fault. A stupid way to die. For a paycheck that wasn't even his. He raised his pistol. He died for nothing, a loose end, just like you in that split second. As Thorne's finger tightened on the trigger, a black and tan blur launched from a high ledge above. Commander, who had been lying in silent ambush as Elias had trained him, hit Thorne's arm with the force of a freight train. The gunshot exploded, the bullet screaming off the far wall. Thorne cried out in pain and shock as Commander's powerful jaws locked onto his forearm, the crack of bone sickeningly loud in the enclosed space. The gun clattered to the floor. Thorne was neutralized. It was over. With Thorne and his men secured, Elias used the satellite phone. He didn't call the local police. He called a number he hadn't used in years, a direct line to a man he trusted implicitly at the highest level of military intelligence. He didn't give his name. He simply uploaded a single, damning audio file from the data drive and gave the coordinates. Within 2 hours, the valley was filled with the sound of helicopters. Federal agents swarmed the property, their efficiency and professionalism telling Elias he had made the right call. They took a wounded, defeated Thorn and his men into custody. The evidence was absolute, and the conspiracy he had orchestrated began to unravel. The historical significance of Silas Blackwood's cave was not lost. Elias worked with state historians to ensure the site and its artifacts were preserved, a testament to a forgotten piece of history. The silver, valued at a fortune, was legally his, but the money meant nothing to him. He used every last cent to establish the Leo Vance Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting the families of fallen special operators and, in a tribute to his truest friend, providing highly trained service dogs to veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress. The derelict property, once a symbol of his decay, became its headquarters. He restored the old cabin, turning it into a welcoming place of refuge and healing. In the end, it was the unwavering loyalty of a dog that led a man back from the brink, forcing him to confront the ghosts of his past by digging into the earth. True redemption wasn't found by erasing the scars, but by transforming them into a source of strength and a legacy of honor. On a warm evening, Elias sat on the porch of the finished cabin, a place of peace, no longer a purgatory. Commander rested his head on his knee, his breathing slow and steady. The ghosts were finally quiet, replaced by the quiet promise of a future built on the foundations of loyalty, sacrifice, and the healing power of a mission completed. True loyalty can heal the deepest wounds, sometimes by showing us a path we cannot see for ourselves. If this story of hope and redemption touched your heart, we would be grateful if you would like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like it. We would be honored to read your own stories about the incredible animals that have changed your lives in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.